Presented to you by Talking the Line Sports Media, a sports gambling podcast by bettors for bettors, connecting you with the brightest, sharpest, and most electric personalities in all the sports gambling industry. So as always, pull up a chair, open up your mind, and get ready to receive knowledge you won't find anywhere else. We can't thank you enough for joining us, and we hope you enjoy. This is Wise Words. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and beautiful gambling people joining us for episode number 6 of the Wise Words podcast. I am your humble, honored, and grateful host, Colton, Colt 45 Soroka, Captain Colt if you follow me on Twitter, and I can't thank you enough for choosing to stop by and get some of the best insights and analysis on the market from some of the brightest and sharpest minds in all of the sports gambling industry. Now, my friends, I don't have to say this, but I will anyway. We got another electric guest on tap today, a man who has one of them large brains, I always like to say as well. He's got plenty of insights, plenty of knowledge to lay out today, but before I bring him in, I must bring in one other gentleman. You know him as the man that sits to my left on every episode of the Talking the Line podcast, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, but also the man who sits in the box to my left on this here Wise Words podcast. Let me bring him on in for today's show, episode number 6, the man, the myth, the degenerate gambling legend, and oh, let's not forget South Sider faithful and TTL resident cheesehead himself, Mr. Riley RMags Magnuson. Partner, how you doing over there today, pal?
My man, I am as fantastic as I can be. It's, we're recording this before the weekend, so not the typical victory Monday that I get to gloat about for my Packers. We are in the middle of my White Sox playoff postseason race, so it is October. I am juiced up for that, but none of that today. I'm excited for our guest to ask a few more questions because as these have gone along, we not only have given our viewers so much knowledge on a daily basis to add to their repertoire, but also for us every now and then as well. So I'm excited for more of that, my man.
You're telling me I have literally been building, I've told you off of the show, I've been building my own betting Frankenstein as we've been going guest by guest, learning a little something new, a little something else, another tool to the tool belt, and being able to just have these conversations and be an open forum and kind of a chance to kick back and not give out stone cold analysis, insights, all that stuff, man. It's just so nice to kind of get to know the real version of some of these guys and some of their stories and backgrounds. So without further ado, you didn't come here to look at me or to look at that guy. You came here to get some insights from the guy that will soon be below us. So let me tell you about him before I bring him on in for today's show. One thing I do know about him is this time of the year is the perfect time to talk with this man because he owns a wealth of knowledge, and not to mention he's one of the sharpest in the NFL and college football sports betting markets. You can find the majority of his content, and as a matter of fact, he writes daily NFL and college football articles for Yahoo Sports and the Philadelphia Insider. So you know we're talking to the right guy. But I will tell you a little bit more. He is also the on-air host for Get Your Bets In with co-host John Jansen on Fox Sports Philadelphia, The Gambler, and he also is the on-air host for the Sharp App's college football live stream, Betting for Breakfast. 2 shows I am a big fan of, and I suggest you tune into as well. Another thing, if you don't follow him on Twitter, a man who has been in this industry creating content for the better part of a decade, believe you me, you will be following him after this show is complete. As we like to say here at TTL Sports Media, he cashes tickets nonstop and has the insights and analysis to back it up. So without further ado, my friends, ladies and gentlemen, everybody joining us on episode number 6, it is my pleasure to welcome in professional sports betting analyst and content creator, ridiculously knowledgeable human being when it comes to the world of football, and all around Philadelphia man to the core, Mr. Mark Drumheller.
Guys, thank you so much for having me on, man. I really love the show. I've been following you guys from the jump, and I'm really excited to talk some football today, man. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Hey, well, we appreciate that. We cannot wait to talk to you. Thank you so much for stopping by, giving us some of your wise words. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate it, Mark.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out which part of the Frankenstein I want to be. Do I want to be like the screws in the neck, or which part am I going to end up being? But hopefully, we can give some useful information that can make the audience win some bets over the weekend.
Hey, sure enough. I always like to say the jury's still out on that, so we'll see what part you end up being here by the end of the show. So let's not waste any time, my friend. Let's get right into it. Now, first things first, I have been asking a lot of our guests this, and I've really been enjoying kind of the broad range of kind of answers that we get, because everybody has really a different perspective on not only the way they bet, but also kind of the markets that they target. So one thing that I wanted to ask you that I've been asking all of our guests is, what is the number one piece of advice you would give a new bettor? Let's say I just walked into XYZ Sportsbook or just downloaded XYZ Sportsbook app. What is the number one piece of advice you would give that bettor, but also that new bettor, a daily degenerate, could utilize those words as well?
Yeah, when things really started to change and click for me was when I started to ignore the scoreboard. And it sounds crazy because that's how bets are graded, right? That's how, the traders grade the bets. It's based on what the result is on the scoreboard. But the scoreboard, there's so much variance, especially in football, that can happen during a game that the scoreboard doesn't tell the story. You really have to dig into the box score. You have to look at the individual drives. How did they score? How really the game transpired, turnovers, penalties, those things all kind of play into it. So, we hear all the time about sports bettors saying, oh, well, I was on the right side, I just got the wrong result. And that's something that happens a lot, to be honest with you. It's just so much variance with, the penalties and different types of officials, and they can have a big influence on the game. So, just because you lose a game or lose a bet doesn't mean that your process was incorrect. And I think it's really important to kind of, you want to adjust your process as you go. You definitely don't want to just stick to what you're doing, but don't let one result or two results just kind of deter the way you're going through your week and placing your bets, because there's a lot of variance, man. A team could win 37-0 and it could be a close game, like we saw with Notre Dame and Wisconsin. That game was very, very competitive until the very end. But if you're just looking at the score, you're thinking it's a blowout, and you're rating the Fighting Irish way ahead of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I like that you talked about the process, because that is something that I think all bettors can really utilize is the moment that you think you have the right process is the moment that it all goes wrong. And I love that that's kind of where you took that. I appreciate the hell out of that answer. And again, appreciate the hell out of you being here, Mark. Partner, what do you got, my friend?
So switching tunes a little bit here. Obviously, you cover Philadelphia sports. You cover that for Philadelphia media. As far as tips for betting on your favorite team or teams, or maybe there's a do not that you'd like to share. What's that tip or do not that you'd like to share about betting on your favorite teams?
Yeah, it's almost like do what I say and not what I do, right? Because I don't think you should bet on those teams, and it's very difficult because nobody knows a team better than its biggest fan, right? So being a fan of your local teams, you know them the best, but it's very hard to be subjective. You're emotionally invested, and it's just tough. And to be honest with you, some of the worst bets that I made have been with my local teams, with the Eagles or with the Sixers. And you just think mentally there's that person on your shoulder that's like, oh, they can't lose this game.
Right.
But, you're not really looking at it from the outside. So if I was, giving anybody advice, I would tell them to just enjoy those games as a fan. Don't let sports betting take that away from you. Keep that fandom and just sit back and enjoy the game.
Yeah, it's great advice. I'm a diehard Packers fan, so I typically fall into that bad advice as far as actually backing them. But I mean, the general advice, the general good advice is to typically keep yourselves out of it.
Yeah, just stay at a distance and use the game to evaluate the other team, right? So if the Packers are playing, the Vikings, you can still do some scouting. You can still get some information out of it. Just do it on the Vikings. So, look to play, 4 against the Vikings the following week.
Definitely.
But just, lay off the home team because it's just, to me, it's been very difficult, to actually look at it objectively.
Definitely.
Same here. I'm a Bears fan, so we obviously oppose on the show, but you get that from time to time. No big deal. We throw blows every once in a while, but hey, it's all right. I still love my guy at the end of the day. But actually kind of sticking with some of those trends, and you mentioned it right there at the end, kind of using maybe your home team to gain film, if you will, on that opposing team. Kind of sticking on that same track. Now, when you go to handicap games, and I don't want you to give away all of your trade secrets, all the good stuff, everything in between. But when you do go to handicap, what are some of those key insights, key trends, or maybe you're watching one of those games and you're kind of jotting some stuff down to the side, like this is what I really target in on, or maybe some things that our viewers out there can target in on as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things, right? So if you're just watching the game kind of as a fan and seeing it, believe your eyes, right? So I think we see that a lot in sports, college football especially. If you see a team and they're struggling, let's say they can't block anybody, right? Like the Bears are playing, the Lions, and the Lions can't block anyone. The Bears getting 100 sacks, and people are surprised at that and thinking, oh, well, the Lions, their offensive line, it's new. They're going to get better as the weeks go on. They're not going to get better, right? And they're especially not going to get better the next week. So we see that a lot. Yeah. You see it much more with like successful teams. Like, okay, maybe a good team, like we'll use give me a good team in the AFC, the Ravens, for instance, right? Let's say the Ravens give up a ton of sacks, Ronnie Stanley's out. All of a sudden, we tend to look at those things as outliers because we like the team and we think the team's going to be successful. So we gloss over those. Not a great idea because usually it's indicative of future performance. And as far as like some of the stats that I use, I think the biggest key now is we have so much data and so much stats, and stats evolve and we get smarter and smarter, as sports bettors and handicappers, just because we have so much more useful information. But it's understanding what the data is telling you. Like for instance, I had a great conversation on Twitter yesterday about the Eagles and yards per play, right? So the Eagles are third in the NFL in yards per play. And, I was advising everyone to watch out. It might be fool's gold a little bit because they have 1 trillion penalties. So when you're looking at statistics that are just solely based on yards, you're not taking into account the game situation, right? So if the Eagles are constantly at 2nd and 20, constantly at 3rd and 15, the defense is going to give you, 10 yards. So, you want to kind of blend it with success rate, what's their offensive success rate, because the defenses are going to be playing them a little bit different if they're, constantly in 2nd, 3rd long situations. So just kind of not having one stat as the end all be all, just kind of blending them all together and understanding the context of each.
Sure. And I think context is really, really important for sure. And most definitely in college football, like you mentioned with the Notre Dame and Wisconsin game. I mean, it's so easy to look at some of those blowout losses and, hey, it was 10-10 at the end of the 3rd quarter. I mean, it's so important to do that. But at the same time, you kind of mentioned it, everybody kind of being experts, having a phone, having the ability to look stuff up. You can kind of get lost in those trends and all that stuff too. So kind of finding that balance. So I appreciate that as well. My friend, what do you got over there?
So just switching tunes again a little bit here. This is something we haven't had the opportunity to ask our guests, and I'm really interested to hear your opinion on this. How important is it for any bettor, I guess, and especially the average person, to start tracking their bets in an attempt to, obviously see whether they're making or losing money, but in an attempt to learn from, whether it's their mistakes or what they're good at? How important is that for you, and then how you would advise other people to do that?
Yeah, it's an excellent point. I mean, it's extremely important because, how I got into sports betting was just that I was so obsessed with my hometown teams that I wanted to know what made them win, what made them lose, what makes teams successful, what doesn't, right? And then you start kind of digging into that, and then you kind of get an idea of, how teams work and how the game's played and keys to look at. And then that kind of just evolves into sports betting. But when you track yourself, you're able to not only see like which games you won or lost, but it gives you a data set to kind of digest, right? And dissect and pick apart, okay, am I betting a lot of underdogs? Am I betting underdogs, short underdogs? Are they winning? Long underdogs. Am I betting a ton of double-digit underdogs? Maybe I'm 0-12, or maybe I'm 1-13 on double-digit underdogs. But I just remember the one because that one hit, and I told everybody on Twitter about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And everybody, gave me 1,000 likes. But you can really kind of pick apart, your behaviors, and not only that, but just find out where you're successful, and that's going to help you because those trends within yourself could be trends within the league as well. And then you can kind of pinpoint them as the season goes on and maybe attack them in a different way.
Yeah, I think it's a great point because I know as far as the average person, I don't think the typical person who, doesn't do this for a living or doesn't, whether it's professionally handicapping or content, I don't think they do that. And then they'll have their 5 favorites and maybe they'll go 4-1, but then they open it. It's like, well, why did I lose a couple bucks here? Well, it's because you did this parlay, that parlay, this one. And then, like you said, they don't really learn from those mistakes. So I think it's great advice.
Yeah, and a great example last year. Like I'll be the first to admit, I was down in October. October was a terrible month for me last year. I'm happy that things are starting off a little different this year. But I had a good September. I had a terrible October. I was able to dig myself out, the rest of the year. But I kind of looked at it and had to figure out, what did I do wrong in October? Was I just picking the wrong games? And I think the hardest part about this time of the season is, you have to balance how much weight you're putting on your priors, your preseason, rankings of these teams and blending it with what you're seeing on the field now and meshing those two can be difficult. I think it's difficult for everybody because internally you don't want to give up on what you thought about a team coming into the season. Last year, Riley, this is a great example. Last year, very down on the Packers. I thought the Packers were going to implode. I said the Aaron Rodgers mess. I said, there's no way. There were underlying metrics that led you to believe that it was an outlier and they were going to come back down to earth last year. And I held on to that way too long into the season when it was very clear the Packers were going to be right back where they were the previous year. So just blending those two things together during the season is kind of like what you have to do now in October, because by November, we know what the teams are and we're pretty comfortable with where we're at. But that can be difficult. And if you're not tracking yourself, you don't know where you're falling short.
Right. Definitely.
Love it, partner. We have not asked a guest that yet. And that holy cow, we went into a whole nother rabbit hole on that. That was awesome. I love that. Holy shit. All right. Keep it moving. Keep it grooving. I want to kind of get a little bit more into betting some markets, some specific markets, specific, however you like to say it. Everybody knows the spread. Everybody knows money line. Everybody knows the total. We actually talked a little bit about tonight's total, time of recording, Thursday Night Football. We'll see where that goes before the show. But everybody knows that. Everybody can be an expert on that. Everybody can dish out those plays. I want to know, in your opinion, what are some of those side markets that might have the most value that kind of those novice bettors gloss right over and don't really take the time to look at, but at the same time are extremely, extremely valuable?
Yeah, well, it's really, the smaller market, the better, because that's, the books are not going to have their top people in those markets, making these lines, right? Like their top people aren't, doing XFL lines in week 1 or whatnot, right? And that was somewhere where, I had a lot of success in the XFL. And when you get these secondary leagues that pop up, there's a lot of WNBA is getting a little more popular, but that's a big one. But if you can find some of these smaller markets, you can really kind of take advantage of it early. Like I love the XFL because every game was on TV, so I could tape every game. I could DVR every game. I'm dating myself a little bit. Go back, break every game down. And all 4 of them were on TV. So now I see every team play, every play, and you can kind of like, you fast forward, you go through, you don't have to sit there through the whole thing, but it gives you the ability to kind of break it down. And there wasn't a lot of data out on it. So it was almost like, hey, we had a leg up on the books. You know what I mean? And there was definitely some opportunity there. But as far as the major sports, if people don't like doing that, the best part about how sports betting has taken off is there's just so many different markets within the major sports. One area that I got into was period betting and hockey. I thought that was, somewhere where there are a lot of edges early in the season. Now, of course, eventually they catch up and all of a sudden, your minus 120s or minus 220s and all the value's gone, right? But if you kind of, something like that is just math. You're tracking when the teams are successful, in which periods, and then you're kind of putting it together just like you do totals. So, stuff like that, those secondary derivative markets, I think there is some value in there. But in my opinion, in my experience, the smaller the market, the better you're going to find the biggest edges.
Sure enough. And we've talked with other guests in the past about kind of some of the prop markets in the NFL and how a lot of people, or maybe just the books in general, would like for you to think that they are just huge money makers and everybody's throwing money at them and they're generating so much handle. And really, at the end of the day, they're not that much at all. Is that kind of the truth? Is that kind of the sense you get, or is that kind of something cooked up?
Yeah, I don't do a lot of props, man,
Yeah,
because they limit you pretty quick.
sure.
Not to be funny, like you'll have a big hit, you'll go in there next day and they're like, okay, max bet $2, and you're like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
thanks.
yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
did all
Right,
this
right,
research,
Yeah.
you know
right,
what I mean? And I can't bet I can't bet all my work. So
right.
that's a little bit of a challenge. I think with the prop market is just that they will give you some good prices, and there's a lot of variance. And
Mm,
you can find some arbitrage between different books, and if you really want to do your homework. But to me, it's just once you start winning, they're going to put the clamps on you because they don't need that market, so they can kind of box you out. So I haven't really put in a lot of work on it. If somebody gives me a tip or something, I might tail them, but
sure.
very limited on the props.
Yeah, we give out maybe 1 or 2 per each of us on our daily show, but yeah, we definitely say
Hmm.
limit on them because even then, I mean, it's so hard to make a profit on your -110, your -108s maybe. I mean, they're starting at -115s, and then they're staying the
Yeah.
same that whole time, and then maybe you get burned by a yard or 2 yards. It's not worth the price at all. So appreciate that answer once again, my friend. Partner, what do you got, bud?
Yeah, I guess kind of switching tunes, but you kind of touched on a little bit as you've been in this space, and now over the last 2 or 3 years, obviously the volume of people in this space have kind of obviously boomed. Have you found it any easier or harder to, find an angle? Maybe you feed off of, a mass type of public bet, or is it not much different since you've been in the space?
Yeah, well, I think that the popular angles get kind of eaten up quick, right? Because they get out there and they get more popular, and then all of a sudden they're not there. Like I talked about the NHL period betting.
Yeah,
Chris Otto, PSU Otto was he did a lot of stuff, and he was a great follow on Twitter. He would upload all his data, so you had all the data there for each team in the periods, and it made it real easy. That
hmm,
stuff was great, but like I said, the market adjusted real quick, right? Once they
yeah,
started getting hammered on it, they decided to kind of then you start seeing the -180s and the -220s, and it just
right,
becomes, at that point you got to win 60-70% of the time in order to turn a profit. It becomes
sure,
not worth really the time that you put into it. So
Hmm,
that sort of stuff. But I do think the benefit of it is you get the ability to just kind of network with so many different people, and
yeah,
in that networking you're going to end up having different ideas about a game and seeing how different people approach the game, and
sure,
what stats some people might think are more important than others. And so it's a constant learning experience, and I think the more popular it is, the more people that are involved in it, it's just better for everybody, because it gives you the ability to constantly check yourself, and that's what you want to do. You
sure.
want to hold yourself accountable. That's really half the battle, is kind of understanding your own behaviors, and keeping yourself accountable throughout the year.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a great answer. And I mean, part of the purpose of this show is kind of what you said as far as the community of connecting people and getting different advice. And I think we've done a decent job of that so
Yeah.
far.
And
Obviously,
it could be,
today and the
hey,
last few
like,
episodes.
yeah, and it could be like a simple thing like, hey, you know what? I'm on, the 49ers over the Packers because I'm out
Yeah.
there and I'm on Twitter and I'm saying A, B, and C. And you could
right.
DM me and
Yeah.
be like, hey, listen, man, like the Packers are doing this all week in practice. I think we
Hmm.
might see this. And
Yeah.
then that could open up a world of opportunities, in the
Yeah.
prop market, in the game, in the total, whatever you
Yeah.
know.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
I love it. I love it. And actually, kind of sticking on that track, I love when we are able to segue like this because I was about to take it kind of right into the market getting bigger and bigger and more people coming in, but a little bit different tune from me. Now, we still run into a lot of people, obviously, us being in the Midwest. I don't still feel that it is grabbed as firm a grasp as it has in a lot of other areas so far. I mean, it's really starting to come up, don't get me wrong, but just not as firm as some other areas. And you hear a lot of times that it's still taboo, or it's maybe a shady back alley deal, or oh, don't people waste their lives away on that? Well, obviously you have 3 professional content creators and sports betting analysts that seem to be doing just fine, can keep shirts on their backs. And so what I want to know, and we haven't been able to ask a guest this too, so this kind of just came to me today as well. is what would be your number one argument? Somebody that kind of says that, and we have our own arguments that we've been able to say, but I'd love to hear from you, Mark. What would you say to someone who says, oh, it's so taboo, it's just a waste of your time, a waste of your life? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, well, as far as the taboo part, it's becoming bigger part of our culture, right? And part of the fan experience. You used to say that about fantasy football in the beginning too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
everybody's, family is at the office doing pools and fantasy football, and they have their fantasy football team and everything like that. So I think that's just a matter of it getting integrated. But I do think that, some of the concerns are valid, but I would say, and I would argue that I think the sports betting space in general does a very good job of policing itself. When you hear the most popular shows, right? Everybody out there with a stream is not going to, give you the rundown on, the dangers of gambling. But a lot of the most successful, streams and shows out there do talk very emphatically about bankroll management. I've heard some of the most successful shows say, hey, listen, if you're going into the year and you have X amount of dollars to spend, then maybe you should be betting $5 a game. Maybe you should be betting $10 a game. And that's the beauty of the sports books is these apps will let you put in a 50-cent bet if you want. So, as long as you're doing it responsibly within your means and doing it for entertainment, then it's fine. It's no different than going to the bar and doing a shot every time they score a touchdown and having a good time and running up a $150 bill than if you're betting $20 on the total, right? What's really the difference? You're just using it for entertainment. It's part of the fan experience. But I do think that sports betting shows in general and the community in general has done a great job stressing bankroll management and how important it is to play within your means.
Yeah, that's one thing we try to do on our daily show too. I mean, we always talk about having a unit system, always sticking to that bankroll management, not afford to be who you can be, right? That old saying. So don't ever go above your means. So that I love where you took that for sure. Had a little something else. I'm sure that'll come back to me at some point in time. I always tend to do that. So partner, hit him with it, my friend.
So I guess switching back to Philadelphia, Philly area. The general perception from the rest of the country is that the Philly fan base is passionate and very opinionated, and a lot of the stadiums can be, I don't know if hostile is the right word, but I would say in a good way hostile. From your perspective, obviously our industry, you're gonna lose close to half of your bets, depending on who you are, it's going to be you're losing 40%, maybe even 60%. Do you feel that type of pressure at all from, your, media fan, or whether you're fans or, your local, I guess Philly fanatics, I guess is what is trying.
It's different, right? I think it's a little different in each city. And the good part about Philadelphia is that the teams are the bottom line, even over money, right? So it's like, like I'm gonna feel heat if I'm going out there and I'm saying, hey, you know what, lay the points with the Cowboys on Monday night because they're gonna steamroll the Eagles. I'm gonna get heat for that more than I would if I said take the Eagles and we all lost our money, right? So the team winning is really the ultimate goal for our fan base. They're just so passionate about their teams that I don't really get a lot of that unless I'm recommending betting against them, which I don't do. I mean, typically I would say, hey, this is one that we might not want to bet, or we might want to look at the total or something else because, you never want to bet against your home team. It's supposed to be fun.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious. I guess if you say hammer in the Eagles and then they lose, maybe you get some flack for it. But I guess it totally makes sense from our.
No, the good part about it is the coaches take all the heat for that.
There you go.
I get to skate right by.
There you go. There you go. All right, I remembered where I was going. You talked briefly in your last answer just before that. Just how we're kind of seeing the integration of sports betting and sports betting content rather, into kind of the shows and the regular broadcasts we're already seeing. Now, we've asked a few guests in the past, and some of them have kind of equated it to maybe the second or third inning in a baseball game. Now, I know you're not an MLB guy, but as far as content and what we're seeing, obviously you've been in for well over a decade now, and you saw where it was it was hard to make content. And now everybody and their brother can get a YouTube page, and if you have good insights, you can start to kind of build a following. What do you think is the future now for maybe some of the guys that are on that baseline and really starting to grow their brand, their personal stuff, from where it was to where it is? And where do you really think the future of sports betting content's going?
Yeah, I think it's just another entry point into the mainstream media. I really think that that's what it's going to be. It's I brought up fantasy football, and I think that's probably the path that it's going, right? Like you
Mm,
turn on CBS and you see, or whatever network, and you see they give you all the fantasy stats, all the rundown, because they know that that's what people want to see. So they want
right.
people to watch. So they give them that information. I think you'll see the same thing with sports betting. I think it'll go hand in hand. I think the popularity of it as it becomes more and more popular is just going to open doors that, some of these major networks are going to want more people that can do content on sports, not only on sports betting, but make it entertaining and
Right.
be able to talk through that stuff. So I think it's great for everybody. It just gives more opportunity for people, and I just think it's going to continue to expand. But I just think you'll see just it just have a bigger presence. So, we've already seen, like,
Right.
the Manning telecast and stuff, and I think some stations will probably move and do some side total sports betting
Mm.
broadcast. But I think ultimately you'll see these major networks and just kind of mesh the two to where it just becomes integrated as part of the regular conversation.
Yeah, and we've talked about that a lot in the past too with some of our guests. Just as far as kind of having that fully integrated across the board, I always like to bring up. My dad called me, and we were talking about back when the Cubs were playing, and he was like, "I saw plus 1,600 something on extra. What is that?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, they got prop markets for days." He goes, "What's a prop market?" And I was like, "Oh boy, this sports betting's
Yeah.
gotten way
Yeah.
past your time." He said, "Listen, I used to go in a back alley and tell John he'd write it down on his pocketbook, and that would be it." I said, "Oh boy, we got to get you on the FanDuel or something." But yeah, I love that it's really starting to become integrated more and more, and that more of us content creators are really all on the same page. It's like, yeah, this is the future. This is where it's going. Everybody, come join the sweat. Come have some fun. So I appreciate that, my friend.
Yeah, I think it's eventually going to get to a spot to where you can just kind of like live bet the games through the station. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Where they're
yeah.
just like, hey, do this, from your television. You can kind of place the bets through the station. Whether that's one of the major networks or whether Amazon comes in and swoops in and takes up everything like they've done in pretty
Yeah,
much every other
yeah,
space.
Yeah.
yeah.
They've already got rights to content, right? So they're streaming the
Sure,
games.
sure.
If they were to open up their own sports book and kind of dive into that, they could really, get you on both ends. They have the content there. They could have you
Wow.
play some bets while you're watching the content. And, hey, they could send you free shipping on your vacuum cleaner that you want to buy too while you're at it, right? So they really have the
Hey,
opportunity to blend
right.
everything
Oh, geez.
together if they do get into that space, and they could kind of shut everybody
Eh,
down. But I
wow.
think you might see the
Yeah.
networks kind of follow that lead, is that, hey, we got people watching this game. Why do we want them going on their phone giving somebody else some of the money instead of,
Right.
having DraftKings pay you to advertise? Just take the whole thing, make the money. They probably don't want to deal with the hassle, but I think eventually it's ultimately all going to come together.
Wow, I love that. If you're seeing the reaction on my face, that is a place we have never taken that before, and that got the
Yeah.
wheels spinning because, my friend, that is not implausible. And hey, Bezos, I know you retired, but you might have to let somebody know what's going on because that's a hell of an idea. We might have just got the market cornered there, Mark. What do you got, Riley?
So I guess kind of continuing on that, you mentioned this could look like how fantasy grew in. Do you think gambling's going to kind of overshadow fantasy at any point? Because I mean, I still love playing fantasy. I played it since I was 7 years old, but now the last couple of years, that especially since we've been doing this full time gambling, I've started to put much less time into it. And, it's still a nice connection to my friends with fantasy football. But do you think it's going to start being phased out? Maybe not phased out, but just not as much of a household conversation as it used to be 5 years ago?
It's just, maybe it might not be as popular, but I think the two will coexist and they'll blend
Yeah.
together, right? Because
Mm, yeah, yeah.
some of the most knowledgeable fantasy football analysts give so much to the sports betting community in the prop
Right.
market, right?
Sure.
And that's really, the tools and the models that they have are very valuable. As far as if you're
Sure.
betting individual players in the prop market.
Mm,
So I think it's just eventually going to kind of blend together. I initially had thought sports betting would carve out its own niche and kind of be its own thing, but it just looks like it's all going to converge together.
yeah.
And there's going to be plenty of opportunity for everybody. So I don't think any of it's going away. The fantasy football community is
Yeah.
humongous, and
Yeah,
it's,
you're right.
it's filled with so
Yeah.
many, so many talented
100%.
people. You're kind of
Mhm.
already seeing it all blend together. So I think that's really
Sure.
what we're looking at in the future. Just, everybody kind of enjoying a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that as far as the prop markets, because I've started to notice that as far as definitely being blended together through the first few weeks of this NFL season so far.
We have talked a lot about sports betting, a lot of good insights. The words below me, you see it, wise words. Plenty of that happen here today. But wanted to maybe give you a chance, take off the sports betting analyst hat for a minute, get a little Philly to the core. And I know you're an Eagles fan. I know you're a Sixers fan. It's NFL season. Let's talk about the Eagles a little bit. Overall, state of the union for the Eagles. What's it like in the city? How's it going? How's everybody feeling? Brutal beat last week with the Chiefs coming into town. What's everything going on? How you feeling? And from the fan perspective yourself.
Yeah, we're not very happy as a sports community, to be honest with you. And it's not, you go into the season, it's kind of like a quote unquote rebuilding year, and you're retooling and you want to find out what the quarterback has. And that's an adjustment for us, right? Because the Eagles in general have been pretty successful over the past, 10, 20 years. And it's very difficult losing 2 games against the rival Cowboys. They let up 41 points, and then Patrick Mahomes does whatever he wants, puts up 42 against the defense. So there's a lot of frustration starting to build, with the fan base and the coaching staff, because it's not just that they're losing, it's the way that they're losing, right? They lead the NFL in penalties. They've had some bizarre calls in the red zone. They just, there isn't a lot of confidence coming from this new coaching staff, which can make a fan anxious, right? Because you just hired him, right? You can't fire him, 3 weeks into the season and go into another guy. You want to kind of give him time to grow into the role, but those growing pains can be very tough on a fan base. And I think we're seeing that now with the Eagles. It doesn't help that the first part of their season, the first half of the schedule is brutal, right? Like we've had the Niners, we had the Cowboys, we had the Chiefs.
Yeah.
We play Carolina on the road, which is still a 3-1 team. I know a lot of people don't like them, but they're a team that's up and coming. And then they get the Buccaneers at home again, and it's just been like a gauntlet. So hopefully they can hold things together if they can tread water through this first half. The second half, you get a lot of NFC East, right? A lot of Washington football team, a lot of Giants. They get the Jets, right? So things get much easier in the second half. We just hope that we can make it till then, and still have something to fight for. Going into the season, I thought if they can tread water, be 500 through the first half of the season, they could really make a push for the division. But right now, I'm not sure if they are going to be able to tread water, and Dallas looks a little bit stronger than I expected, unfortunately. So we're going to have to see how things play out. But it's a little rough here in Philadelphia right now.
As to be expected. I was kind of expecting a little bit of that answer, but you and me both there on the Star there in Dallas, my friend. I was extremely low on them coming into the year, and they've shocked me. Hey, we still got plenty of NFL weeks to play yet.
A lot of time left.
But gee,
plenty of time for Mike McCarthy to show his true colors. So
we're
banking on that.
That's kind of what I've been thinking. But hey, who am I? Partner, what do you got, my friend?
So switching gears, staying with Philly, I've never had a chance, at least the last few months, to talk to a Sixers fan in this type of context. State of the union on the Sixers now. Not only the Sixers, but the situation, the elephant in the room that is every 76ers conversation, Ben Simmons. Any idea where you guys go? I don't know how do you resolve it is the right word, because I don't know if I've ever seen a situation like this with the player and a team.
Yeah, so it's who are these Sixers, right? I don't even recognize this team anymore. Right. I feel like there's so much chaos going on, and it's really just a matter. I said this from the beginning when this whole, Ben Simmons, we have to get rid of him, campaign started after the playoff series, and I had thought that getting rid of him would be the easy part, and the challenging part would be who do you get in return, and how do you build a championship team around the pieces that you have with Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris. It sounds easy, but when you remove Simmons from the equation, you lose a lot defensively, right? And they really couldn't cover anybody against Atlanta to begin with. We know Horter went off, and they really struggled defensively, I think, in that series a lot more than a lot of people expected. So you're going to have to get some kind of defensive talent back there to supplement that. But now that they can't, there's really not a trade market for Simmons. People kind of know that the Sixers are backed into a corner here. They're going to have to take, pennies on the dollar, and they're going to really get a bad deal. And it's going to be tough because you have to. Morey's biggest test is going to be after he makes the deal. How do you put the other pieces around to turn this back into a championship team? And that's really, what we're all waiting to see. But until Simmons moves on, I don't know who this team is because I don't know what they're going to look like.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I said, I've never seen anything like it. And if you follow Daryl Morey, he's not going to want to take pennies on the dollar. And it's just such a struggle because a year ago you probably could have at least got, I would say, maybe 75 cents on the dollar. But after that playoff series, I don't know where they go from here.
Yeah, this close to having Harden, which I was not in favor of doing at the time because I was like, man, I don't know how many years this guy has left. He doesn't seem real committed, but and you heard some bad stories out of Houston, but man, I tell you, they're not going to get anything close to Harden now. So it's a little challenging. It's going to be challenging, but it'll be good to turn the page and kind of focus on basketball once the season comes. But I feel like they have to make a move soon. They can't let it drag out into the season.
Right. And we're only about, I guess, at time of recording, somewhere just under 2 weeks, I think, from the start of the season.
Yeah. So the seat's hot on Morey. But like I said, the real work is after the deal is done.
Yeah.
What do you do from there and how do you get this team back in championship contention?
Right.
What language are you guys just speaking? Was that whoa? What was that? You don't know it, Mark, but our fans do. Mags is the NBA guy. Obviously, you can totally tell. I love capping it. I love the spreads, but he gets into all of that. I just do.
Yeah, I love on the court as much as I love all of this off the court player movement type drama. So I'm a sucker for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just absolutely love to cap it. So. Outside of that, man, we have covered so much. We got amazing insights from you, analysis, your thoughts on kind of the content, sports betting, Eagles stuff. We got Philly stuff out of the way. I have pretty much every box checked off that I could possibly want. Partner, did you get anything or did you miss anything possibly that you wanted to ask the legendary Mark Drumheller?
No, sir. I am all tapped out on my questions here.
All right. I'm about the same, but we never let a guest dip on out of the Wise Words podcast without giving them an opportunity to let our audience know where they can find them. So, Mark, if you can be so kind, my friend, where can we find you on Twitter? And then maybe some of your content out there, other places that we can get your insights and analysis.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Colton. Listen, you can read me during the week at Yahoo Sportsbook, doing NFL, college football content. I have new articles coming out every day. So, definitely follow those guys and you can read, my content there. You can hear me every Friday on Fox Sports Philadelphia, The Gambler. You can stream it on iHeartRadio. Just tell Alexa, play Fox Sports, The Gambler, and she knows she's going to fire it up for you. So I'm on there Fridays, usually 5:30 live, talking about the NFL weekend card. So make sure you tune in there. And also every Saturday on the Sharp app, the Sharp new sports betting app. It's incredible. It's odds comparison, bet tracking. There's a ton of content in there. There's a master class from the Sharp Academy for novice or experienced bettors that can kind of walk you through the different aspects of sports betting. So if you haven't downloaded the app yet, make sure you go out and download that Sharp app. But you can catch me in the Discord channel. There's a free Sharp Discord. You can get the link on my Twitter profile. Follow me at @X_Drumheller, but we're in that Discord every Saturday talking college football all day and putting in some bets and making some money.
Beautiful.
I love it. And I will tell you straight from me, my friend, I live for your articles when you put them out. I love your writing style. I love the value you put out there. So from me to you, I appreciate the hell out of your content, my friend. 150%.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it so much, man. I loved being on here. I can't wait to come back and do it sometime in the future.
Oh, you better believe we're going to have you on for round number 2, my friend. We got plenty to ask. We got plenty to talk about. And we got a whole nother 12 weeks of the NFL season here. So I'm sure within a few weeks, we might have to reconvene on those old Philadelphia Eagles, huh?
Sounds good.
All right, my friend. Hey, one more time, we appreciate the hell out of you, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. Outside of that, to all of you who stopped by episode number 6 of the Wise Words podcast, whether you remember the TTL faithful, somebody who just stumbled upon, or maybe you've been following Mark for a while and you come on over. Welcome. Thank you so much. We can't tell you how much we appreciate each and every one of you. As always, we hope you have a spectacular rest of your Wednesday, unless you have any other plans. And hey, partner, let's cash some tickets.